Hello and welcome to my updated boss difficulty tier list where I will rank all solo bosses in the game. Whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax and enjoy. The bosses in this video will be ranked based on my own experience and opinion, which has unsurprisingly changed since my last video like this back in 2019. I will try to give context for each of my choices, but undoubtedly people will disagree. You're entitled to your own opinion, even if it's wrong. Only kidding, of course. I'd actually love to see your thoughts down in the comments below. Perhaps throw me your top 5 most difficult bosses, and we'll see how our opinions are different. Now, it's worth noting that these are only the Beast tab bosses, so things like the Mimic are not included. It's also worth noting I will not include PvM feats like 4K Enraged Telos or the Arglacior, Solo Angel of Death, and Solo Raids, simply because I cannot rank these, because I have no idea what they're like, and I don't think they're realistic for the average Joe. That being said, I will mention group boss difficulty near the end as a sort of bonus. Let's begin. Alright, let's kick it off with Barrows. Now, Barrows is a very old boss, and I don't think we can necessarily really call Barrows a boss anymore. I would definitely say that Barrows is beginner and probably is one of, if not the easiest boss in Runescape, if you can even call it a boss in modern Runescape. Next up we have the Sanctum Guardian. Now the Sanctum Guardian is quite a tough little boss if your DPS is low, because the amount of smoke will simply make the kill awful. Since I'm ranking these based on how I feel about them personally, I do think that the Sanctum Guardian is a hard boss, but we'll have to see about the other Elite Dungeon 1 bosses in just a second. So the other Elite Dungeon 1 bosses are hiding, so let me just grab them over there. The thing about the Sanctum Guardian is that if your DPS is low, like I said, it is going to be harder than Masuta. I genuinely believe that the Sanctum Guardian is a harder boss than Masuta, but the only reason I'm going to put Masuta above the Sanctum Guardian is because I can DPS through this boss quite easily, and then it really isn't that big of a deal. Would I say Masuta is harder? That's a difficult one. The thing about Seiryu is you need to pay attention a little bit more, and with Masuta, really all you need to do is pray for... No, actually, no. Now, the Sanctum Guardian is going to be a little bit easier than Masuta. Just barely. Then we have Calvite Queen, in this case being the Exiled one only. This thing has quite some defense. Is it hard? No, I'll say it's a beginner boss, but low accuracy does get punished here, for sure. It's going to be hard on the Barrows for sure as well. Corporal Beast, this is an old boss, and, you know, best done with melee and spear weapons. Corporal Beast is... how would I say it? Corporal Beast is, he makes you eat food, that's for sure. He does deal a lot of damage, especially if you don't have good gear. So, I'll put him in the easy section because his mechanics are basically, well, you can ignore them apart from the little thingy that jumps around. But definitely harder than these two bosses down here. I'll put him in easy tier. Telos. And Telos 100% and 500% in Rage. Now, Telos is a challenging boss for sure, because there's so much you need to pay attention to. The hold still, the beams, his auto attacks can be pretty tough if you're not used to it. There's instant kill mechanics you need to font. But 0% Enraged Telos is very doable if you have some PvM experience. I would put 0% Telos in the advanced section. To do Telos consistently, it might be a little bit harder, but to get one single kill, I would say the advanced section is a good place to put Telos. At 100% Enraged Telos, you do have to deal with phase 5, and if your damage is low and you're not paying attention to the virus and, you know, you get red golems, it can be quite tough, and it's going to be harder than 0% for obvious reasons, okay? So I'm going to put him in the challenging section. A small editor's note here, I didn't mean to place Telos in the challenging tier, as he's supposed to go into the hard tier above Elite Dungeon 1, and this is something I realized later into the video. As for 500% Enraged Telos, I have actually done this in practice mode with Crippling Armor. You can get instant killed quite easily if you mess up things. The hold still deals a lot of damage, the nuke in P3 can easily delete you. And for that reason, this is going to go straight into the very hard tier. This is not a joke. Even though Telos has been in the game for quite some time now, this is still easily one of the hardest bosses in the game at higher enrages. And for obvious reasons, I'm not going to include anything above 500% enrage because I've not tried it. and it's just beyond my skill level. I would say though that with Animate Dead and Crippling Armor, you can cheese your way through 500% Enrage. The only thing is though, to get to 500% Enrage, you need to really grind Telos to go up the Enrage, and therefore I would say it's a little bit harder than getting 1 kill in practice mode, okay? We then have Queen Black Dragon. Now this is, in my opinion, with my gear, an easy boss. It is just an easy boss. Now, there is an issue though. If you don't have super anti-fires, this boss could easily go up here. Because it just hits like a truck, the flame walls are painful, and the lower your DPS is, the harder the fight will become. But for me, with my gear, this boss is easy. We then have the Magister. Now the Magister is not easy, because he does it hard. You know, you do need to pay attention. He's a bit of a DPS dummy for people with good gear, and he can even be semi-AFK'd. That being said, I'd still put the Magister in intermediate, simply because he is incomparable to the bosses right here. And if you do have low accuracy, you're going to struggle against the Magister especially. We then have Araxor. Now Araxor is a big step up from a lot of things. Especially if you look at these bosses on the tier list right here. Well, I would put Araxor in the advanced section below Telos for obvious reasons. Araxor has quite a few mechanics, and if you're not paying attention you will die. Phase 4 in specific is pretty tough for people that have low DPS and are not used to moving around, having to pray a flick. And if minion path is open, it's going to be even harder, and you're definitely going to be eating through a lot of food. This is one of those bosses where overloads are definitely recommended, because without them you're going to struggle. Araxor is definitely an advanced boss, even though some people watching this video might think he's a pushover. I don't think he is, and when I was first trying this boss, I definitely died a few times, but that was, you know, a long time ago. 300% Araxor, where basically you just, you know, you take a lot more damage, you can definitely get clapped by the webs. I'm just going to put him in hard, because it's definitely a hard boss. 300% Enrage in Araxor is no joke. Alright, Stellar, the boss that apparently people on Twitter seem to hate because of the neutron stars or something. This boss is a quick fight, but you can also quickly die. You can easily get instant kill with the neutron star, and you take a lot of damage during the fight. Is this boss particularly hard? Not really. I would say if you can kill Araxor, you can take down a Stellar pretty normally. Barrow's Rise of the Six. Now this is a group boss, and there's no reason to really solo unless you're an Iron Man and you can't find a group and you want to do your Reaper. This is a boss I believe I had in S tier in my older ranking video, so in hard. And I think I put it above some other bosses, but I tried it recently with the Dark Bow EOF. I don't think this is a very hard boss. You just need a good rotation without Carol and Torag on the same side, because Torag can basically lock you into place unless you use a bleed, I believe. But if they aren't, if you have a Dark Bow EOF, you have the required gear, you know, you have Elder Overloads, you have Reckless on, you can get in a couple of attempts. I did it without a guide, so, and I'm not that good at BVM, so I'm going to go ahead and put Rise of the Six solos right over here. Actually, hold up. I'm going to go ahead and put Rise of the Six solos about there, given that you have a Dark Bow UF. Without it, this boss would easily be very hard. We then have the Blackstone Dragon. Now, in my previous video, I did rank it around the same as a Stellar, but I'm definitely going to go ahead and put the Blackstone Dragon in Advanced. And I think people might disagree with me here, but I believe that the Blackstone Dragon is harder than Araxor, harder than a Stellar, just because the fight can take some time. The mechanics are quite easy to deal with. You can safe spot the hand section, but he hits like a truck. You need to deal good damage, and without good damage, you can run out of food. And for that reason, I would say that the Blackstone Dragon is actually harder than a Stellar, just because of the length of the fight. We then have Chaos Elemental, and you know, guys, this is like one of the easiest bosses, just like Barrows. Probably, is it harder than Barrows? No, not really. Crassian Leviathan, one of the coolest looking bosses in the game, doesn't drop anything of value really. Is it hard? No, it's not. I would put it in intermediate. You do need good damage, as usual. You need poison to stop it from healing, I believe. And, you know, it has 2 or 3 things you need to watch out for. The puke, him moving his head, and, you know, moving to the other side where you can use flanking and such. But other than that, not a very hard boss, just an intermediate boss, and most players should be able to do this boss just fine. Dagonov Kings, easy. They are definitely harder than beginner bosses because they hit hard, and if you don't say spot the melee one, and you're slow, multiple will attack you. In that case, it could even go up to intermediate, to be honest, but with my gear, not really. Easy. We then have the Giant Mole, and I'm actually going to move up Calfight King, because these two bosses right here, they should be removed from the game. Everything about these bosses suck. Giant Mole moves around, stuns you, annoying boss, you know, the health, everything about this boss is garbage, unless you're doing it for like 4 or 5 people, where everyone is standing in one room, and you can easily farm him. This boss is terrible, its design is terrible. It's outdated. It does look awesome though, the pet is nice, but this boss is just garbage. Is it hard? No, not really. I'd call it a beginner boss. You can kill it in free-to-play. It can put up a fight in free-to-play for sure. I've done it in free-to-play gear, but I did have level 99 stats. So it could be hard, but for me, definitely a beginner boss. Calfight King. This is a group boss, and if you were to do it in a group of 2 or 3 players, this boss could go right over there in intermediate. The thing is though, this is a solo bosses tier list, and solo in Calfight King is ridiculously hard. It easily beats everything here, just because if you mess up one thing, one green, you're dead. There's no room for error. This boss requires perfection in terms of timing, unless it's fully magic phase. In that case, you could probably get one solo quite easily if you're a little bit lucky, RNG wise. But to consistently solo Calfight King, you need to be a very good PvMer. It could maybe even go into very hard. It's hard to say. This boss is ridiculously hard to solo consistently. For one kill, you'd be able to... Yeah, let's just put it over there for now. Gold Rush Dungeon 1 bosses. These are easily beginner bosses nowadays. They don't have much health, but without good gear, they can definitely still give you a run for your money. They hit hard, and for a high level player like myself, this boss or these bosses sometimes have lower HP than Slayer monsters. Not very hard. Gold Rush Dungeon 1 hard mode though can be a little bit tricky. Some mechanics are annoying, like the falling rocks. Is it necessarily much harder? No, not really. Should be a little bit... No, actually no, let's put it over here. I do think that QBD is a little bit more difficult. Huracan used to be pretty tricky. It's got on a buff, like 7 years ago or something, I don't know. Is it hard? Is it easy? No, it's intermediate. Definitely a little bit more difficult than the Magister because it requires you to use more supplies. You need to pay attention more. If you use the safe spot rocks, it's not that bad. Yeah, definitely a boss most players would easily be able to do with tier 70 to 80 gear. In my case, intermediate boss, not very hard. Alright, so Kerapac normal mode. Kerapac normal mode is something I compare a lot to Araxor, and it simply is harder. Not necessarily because of the mechanics, but you need to pay attention a little bit more. You take more damage, I feel, overall, compared to 0% in Rage Araxor, that is. I'm just going to say he's harder. Kerapac hard mode is a different story entirely. Phase 4 in Kerapac hard mode without Animate Dead and Crit Bloom or Tank Armor is incredibly difficult. I did a kill my first attempt with Crit Bloom, solo that is. I've done trios. You should do this boss in trios if you want to make money, I believe, because it's just simply faster, just chin them, really easy. But in solos, this is a very hard boss. It's only made easier because of the fact you can use Animate Dead and Crit Bloom, which allows you, and if you have a defender as well, you can just use defensives, cycle through those, and phase 4 isn't too bad, but without it, still a very, very hard boss. King Black Dragon, yeah, straight into beginner. Easier than Gold Rush Dungeon 1 though. Legios can be a little bit annoying, but I'm going to go ahead and place these right over there. Okay, I just realized something. Telos should definitely be right there. Next solos. Oh. Well, Nex is a great boss, and Bloodface is really the main thing that makes it difficult. But if you know you can kill the Reavers, you can get through it slowly, so it's definitely very possible. But this boss requires some good gear, good accuracy, and definitely some skill and practice as well. It's easily one of the harder bosses in the game. Yeah, it's definitely going to go above Elite Dungeon 1 bosses in my eyes, but not harder than 100% Enraged Telos. Raksha, aka Barney. the boss that I absolutely hated on release. Now, I've got a couple of solos, and this boss is still very, very hard, despite being nerfed. And in my eyes, you know, Crit Bloom can't really help you Raksha that much. You just really need to pay attention to the mechanics, pray flick constantly, and try to keep the enrage or the, you know, the purple bar as low as you can for the final phase. Regardless though, Raksha is easily a very hard boss, and I think Raksha is harder than hard mode Carapac. Raksha requires more consistency, and if you mess something up, you're dead. One hard mode Carapac, you should be able to face tank it with the exception of maybe some things in P4. As long as you're able to eat up high, use your defensives, you're good. Raksha, you can use all the defensive you want, but if you get swiped, it's that simple. You're just dead. Rex Matriarchs. These are, an interesting one. I would say I would put them over... Are they harder than the Magister? No, they're not. You can AFK the green one. The red one is kind of annoying to kill with magic. The ranged one, no. No, this is a good place to put them. Intermediate tier. Taraket. Well, Taraket is actually really tough to kill. With Crit Bloom, it's pretty easy. You can even AFK Taraket, I think. Well, not AFK, but you can like no food him really easily, I think. I'm gonna put him in the advanced tier. Taraket just hits like a truck. It's kind of like Carapac, but a little bit more tedious. And the mechanics can kill you more easily, especially the ghost. The Ambassador. Where would I put the Ambassador? Well, clearly in the very hard tier. Now, the only thing I'm struggling with is, do I put him in before Raksha or harder than Raksha? The thing is, if your DPS is godlike, Ambassador isn't that bad. As long as you don't accidentally use your defensives on something else, you know, for the final part of the fight, or the bombs, if you're able to one-cycle the spinners, basically, if your damage is good, like really good or above average, actually the same can be said about Raksha. If your damage is good, you won't have to worry that much about the fight, and you won't use that much food. I do think that the Ambassador just is a little bit harder though. I think that Raksha is slightly easier, but these are really... You know, these two bosses are very similar in terms of difficulty. If you can do Raksha, you can probably do the Ambassador. And if you can do the Ambassador, you can probably do Raksha. Regular Jad. Let's go ahead and place him. The only thing stopping you from doing this boss at all is fear and panic, because people are scared of Jad. It's your first encounter with prey flicking. Actually, for that reason, I'm actually going to put him a little bit higher. Yeah. Let's put him over here. Mechanically, you need to do a little bit more than just deal damage and eat food. So, let's put him over here. It's a beginner boss, surely. You can do this boss with tier 60 to 70 gear. The only thing stopping you is you need to focus on keeping your health high. And prey flicking can be a little bit scary if it's your first time. But other than that, Jad, not a hard boss. Definitely a beginner boss. Not a boss I would recommend learning prey flicking with, by the way. You're probably better off doing that as something like Rax. Veraclif. Yeah, Veraclif is going to go over here. I think Veraclif is harder than Crassian. There's more mechanics you need to pay attention to. You can't get instant kill that easily compared to the Stellarn. But, you know, the eggs, the firewalls. Veraclif also... I feel like Veraclif does a lot of damage. Maybe I'm the only one, but I have to eat quite a bit of Veraclif, especially when I'm using something like ranged and he comes into melee distance and bites me constantly. It definitely hurts. Is it harder than these other bosses? I don't think so. It's quite hard. These intermediate and advanced bosses, to balance these out depends on so many factors. But yeah, personally I would rank them like this. Gordor's Dungeon 2. Well, this is easy. There we go. This is an easy boss. You have to pay attention a little bit. But most of the bosses are really easy. You can even AFK them nowadays, but that's with high level gear, of course. Gordor's Dungeon 2 bosses have 1 or 2 mechanics you really need to know about. Vindicta, for example, is literally just move out of the fire and pray flick in the second phase if you want to save food. Yeah, Gordor's Dungeon 2 is literally just a few mechanics you need to know about. It's definitely harder than these and these, but it's still an easy boss. The problem is gear. Without good gear, kills are long and you use a lot of food. But getting a single kill, definitely very easy. Challenge mode, on the other hand, would probably go over there. Not because it's necessarily challenging, Well, it depends, I guess. Hellweir, maybe. Maybe not. Vindicta is just a long fight. You need a lot of food. Is it really harder than Araxor? Actually, yeah, it probably is because of the amount of damage you take. But Araxor requires more skill. I'd say challenge mode is more dependent on you being able to keep your health high again. I'm going to rank Zuck and Zuck hard mode in terms of getting a deathless run. Not a flawless run with the challenges, because, you know, that would be a little bit more difficult. But really, doing a run without dying is what we're going for here. So, doing a full run, this includes all waves, without using checkpoints, and just going through it, and killing Zuck at the end with the same inventory setup. I would say that Zuck, normal mode, is harder than Calfight King solos. If we're looking at getting, you know, a kill, right? Because with Calfight King, with some RNG, it's not going to be that bad. Tell us 100%, you can eat through most of the mechanics. I just feel like Zuck is going to be more difficult to get a deathless run in than these bosses right here. Alright, as for a hard mode Zuck, a deathless run is something I haven't done yet. I recently did my first kill count, and I just ran out of food at Zuck. That was the main issue. So I'd say a deathless run is very hard, extremely hard, and probably harder than all of these bosses right here. Despite Zuck himself not being that big of a deal with Crypt Bloom and Anime Dead, the entire fight, you just eat so much food. It's a huge endurance test. And if you're not paying attention, you can get killed by the fire moving around the arena. And the last part of the fight is really easy with the bombs and the pillar, but Zuck hard mode, definitely going to be the hardest challenge in the game, in my opinion, compared to all of these other ones. With hard mode Zuck, I just really feel like you'd be able to get a kill at all of these other bosses far more easily than get a deathless hard mode Zuck run. It just... I mean, the same thing with normal mode, right? If you're using checkpoints, I would even go as far to say that Zuck is challenging, right? If you're able to use checkpoints, you could potentially restock, what is it, like every 5 waves? Which would make this boss far more doable. Because if you're doing this boss with, you know, a full yak at the end, since we're talking about a deathless run without checkpoints, I'm going to go ahead and put Zuck over here. The Arcglacier, little ice cube boy. I'm going to go ahead and put normal mode in easy. This is assuming you have all 5 mechanics turned on. Otherwise, I'd say that one mechanic Arcglacier is probably there. That's how easy it is. It does have high defense though. So what about 100% Enrage Arcglacier hard mode? Well, if I'm being entirely honest, I'll put it over here actually. If you can master the beams and the ice mechanic with devotion, maybe I think it's that easy because I have good gear. Maybe it's harder without the gear. The thing with hard mode is that the arms are quite difficult to deal with if you have bad DPS. Again, I'm ranking these based on myself though. So, yeah, I think this is a good spot for 100% Enrage Arcglacier hard mode. As for 500% Enrage, and I'm aware you can go way beyond 500%, is something, just because of the endurance, I would place 500% Enrage Arcglacier in challenging. It's definitely harder than Tarakat. It's definitely harder than 0% Enrage Telos. It's definitely harder than Black Sun. It is. This is a good place to put the 500% Enrage Arcglacier hard mode kill. Now, I'm looking at this list, seeing if I would change anything. Actually, because of the rotation, I'm going to go ahead and move Solo Rots just below Nex. If you can consistently kill Nex, you could probably, with the Dark WF, solo most of the Rots rotations. But because there's annoying rotations, I'm going to have to move Rots a little bit further up. Actually, yeah, I'm going to move up Araxor a little bit as well. I think 300% range Araxor is going to be more difficult than ED1. Yeah. It's hard to rank these bosses because they're so fundamentally different. If we take a look at Araxor, you can get killed by one Reflect at 300% enrage. You have one snapshot, you're dead. The Sanctum Guardian, if you miss a Prayer Flick, you'll survive. I feel like these bosses are more forgiving. Rots, if you mess something up with a bomb and you get spinned, you're dead as well. It's that simple. But the fight itself, super easy. Just chin, Dark Bar UF, and done. I believe this is final, and I think this is a fair list, honestly. If you guys were curious where I would place the group bosses in this game on the tier list, this is how I would set it up. Now, there's a couple of issues with this. One, some bosses have like 5, 6, 7 roles. You have different team sizes. Let's say Varango Duo is much harder than 3 or 4 man. And the same can be said about AOD and Solak. But I would say the average PvMer when trying these bosses, it will be about this hard to learn these bosses compared to the other list of solo bosses. So for example, Yakumaru Virago next AOD would be slightly easier than Elite Dungeon 1 solos, or 100% Telos in my opinion. And Solak is one of those bosses that requires a little bit more knowledge to do properly, and for that reason it's supposed to be in the hard tier in my opinion. And Croesus, while being easy and kind of like a newbie boss, you do need some good coordination in between your team, so for that reason it is an intermediate boss. And let's be honest, Croesus requires more coordination than Gold Rush Dungeon 2 or QBD, right? With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it interesting. If you did, be sure to leave a like down below and maybe even consider subscribing. A thank you to the channel members supporting the channel, and if you too want to support the channel, you can click the join option down below. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.